Good morning, everyone. For those of you who are starting to join, we will be starting at 11 o'clock, giving some attendees some opportunity and time to log on. So if you do not hear anything, do not be alarmed. We will begin at 11 o'clock. Thank you. For those who are starting to join, we are waiting until 11 to start. We're waiting for more attendees to arrive. So don't be alarmed if we are quiet, but we are waiting for more people to attend. Thank you. Hey everyone, we're going to give it a couple more minutes to have more people sign in. Thank you all that are signed up already and on time. We appreciate your on timeness. So we're going to give it 2 more minutes to let people sign in, and then we will begin. Thank you. All right, great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. My name is Josue Melendez. I'm the program manager here at the National Center for Victims of Crime for the Complex Homicide Program. Most of you all may know this program a little bit if you are part of your multidisciplinary team from one of the 7 sites under this program for the Complex Homicide Program. Today's webinar is entitled Having Critical Conversation Through a Diverse Lens, which will be presented by Dr.DaNine Fleming. She is the Associate Professor and Director of Training and Intercultural Education at the Medical University of South Carolina. Before we begin, I do want to give some house rules. At the bottom, you'll see a Q&A. At the end of the webinar, we will have about 10-15 minutes to go over any questions. If throughout the webinar you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box and we'll read them in order at the end of the webinar. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to chat me. At the bottom, you'll see a chat box as well, and we will address those issues as is. This webinar is recorded and will be sent out to everyone who registered for the webinar. And we will also send out a link for a survey for the webinar, so please fill out that survey as well. And without further ado, I will let Dr. DaNine Fleming take it away.
Perfect. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Josue. I want to also thank Megan, who behind the scenes, so many things go on, as well as Ronnie, who we will introduce in a few minutes. It's my pleasure to serve you. Let me start there. In everything that we do, how often is it that when someone is working with you and or for you, that we are in the service? This is what we do, we serve. And so today I want to begin by just telling you, I am elated for this opportunity and to serve each of you. So with saying that, I want to have the disclosure that you can read. I'm one to believe you can read, so it's not about reading it to you or for you, but that you know how this webinar was produced, why, who, and that my opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations are those of myself and the contributors, but don't necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. So as we go into introductions, Ronnie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I will do the same, and to get just a little deeper with who is a part of?
Sure. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ronnie Chatterjee, and I'm the Deputy Director of Training and Intercultural Education at the Medical University of South Carolina. As Dr. Fleming mentioned, it is my pleasure to serve you this morning. I am handling a few of the technical responsibilities on our end here in the Low Country of South Carolina. My background is in public health, specifically epidemiology, and so I'm quite passionate about the intersection of both diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as crime and violence as a public health issue. So keeping that in mind and what's affecting us throughout our time together this morning will be important. But again, it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning.
And you heard what I do as my career, but I want you to know in this capacity today, I'm also with my consulting group, the Nevaeh group, and it's for diversity and inclusion, and I'm a senior founding member. I also think it is important that you know, because the things I want to bring to the table today is thinking about I am a survivor. As we go into things, you will see it's going to be wearing many hats. My nephew was murdered in 2016. And so because of that, I am also a founding member of a grassroots organization within the Lincolnville community, which is in Summerville, South Carolina, one of the oldest Black communities in the South. And so working with the mayor, law enforcement, victims advocates, et cetera, as a part of what I do, it's called Taking Back Our Village. So there is a lot that goes in, because sometimes when we think about unconscious bias, implicit bias, people, it's not always we see what we get, and what we get is what we see, and what we see is what we get. So if I were in front of you right now, one of the things I would want to do is look each of you in the eye, and I would want to remind you that you deserve to be treated well. So I want to take a moment and remind each of you, and I want you to hear me well, that you deserve to be treated well. When you give good news, you deserve to be treated well. When you give not so good news, you deserve to be treated well. When you get it right, you deserve to be treated well. And sometimes when it doesn't go right, you deserve to be treated well. So when we think about bringing everything to the forefront, I call it bringing humanity in the room. These are things that we must think of. So for those who may be in the room with you, for those who may not be in the room with someone else because of, I don't say social distancing, I like to say that we are basically distance socializing, because that's the way, I just don't think anybody should be in isolation. So I want you to know that you deserve to be treated well. And in saying that, that is a part of why we are providing this type of information. And it's probably a little non-traditional for some, because in the nature of what you do, sometimes when people lash out, folks act as if that is an expected outcome or result. And that's not necessarily true. They deserve to be treated well, and so do you. So as we go into the objectives, and I think you probably had those, I want just to remind you with everything that we're doing today that diversity promotes healthier leadership and decision-making. Our job today is to work with you to know so you can see a different way and how unconscious bias and how it influences decisions. Identify how bias in the process of the unconscious mind, your mind, can impact critical decisions and results. And lastly, acknowledge the impact that individuals have on affecting decisions free from unconscious bias. When we make decisions utilizing bias and we are aware versus when we are unaware. And so how important that is in the nature of what we all do. And next, you will see just an outline of kind of what we're going to do in our time together today. And so one of the first things we want to make sure it's going to be engaging. There's some things, there are going to be some polls, there's going to be some video clips, there's going to be a lot going on because we want to make sure we are addressing everyone and we are also engaging you in ways that are beneficial to you. So as we go into the agreements, I want you to think of the fact that although we may not be able to see you, I don't believe in cyberbullying, I don't believe in mistreating people in any way, that the rules of engagement are as follows. Confidentiality, that what is said in the room stays in the room type of situation, like the Vegas rules. Be very careful, not only today, but when you are around other people and doing the work that you do, that sometimes people take things out of context or attach your name to something, because I'm sure many of us have had our name, a story or seen a story on the front page of the paper, and it's all wrong and it's all bad. But the retraction is on page 13, 5 days later, and it's about as small as like microscopic. So remember that what people share and how they share, it doesn't always have to be attached with a name versus a situation. Speaking for self, whether you are in the chat or whether you have questions, we want to make sure we address them. And this is something that's great to let colleagues know and those that we come in contact, and not only professionally, but personally. Don't tell me what someone else said. Tell me, they felt comfortable telling you, but let's talk about how we can use our authentic voice to speak for ourselves and not have others speak for us or speak for others. It doesn't matter what role you have right now. Hats off. We are all human beings breathing, surviving what is going on outside of our walls, which is a pandemic. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring that into light, thinking so many are probably just, should be on, could be on, so much going on, as well as what's going on in the world. So just to invite you to take a moment to just breathe. And that sounds a little like what? Yeah, inhale and exhale. Be intentional about that, because sometimes you just have to step away. Respect everyone's perspective. It's not about right and wrong. We can see where people are coming from because of the different lenses. I didn't say we had to agree, but what we're not going to do is be disagreeable with that. And can you imagine what our workplaces and other places, especially right now, would look like if we just respected others' perspectives? Begin to ask permission to continue dialogue. Wow, something was said. It sparks your interest. It makes you want to know more. Can I talk about that more with you later? Oh my goodness. this is amazing to me, or I just don't agree with that. Well, let's have a conversation, but ask people permission. Just because you're bringing information or it's being brought to you, it does not mean you want to continue talking about it in the moment. And last but not least, the one I just think is one of the most important is take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. And how in the world can you take care of other people? How in the world can you do what you do every day if you're not first taking care of yourself? So what I like to use as an analogy is an oxygen mask. So imagine you're on an airplane, and as you're on the airplane, where you're told if the cabin were to lose pressure and the oxygen mask were to come down, who do you put the mask on first? Who should you put the mask on first? And someone can chime in, whether it's in the chat. Would they tell you all the time? Now, granted, maybe I want to put it on my husband because, we've been married for a while and I love him, etc. But no, if I don't put it on myself first, or maybe my daughter. But what it boils down to is this. A lot of us have been perpetrating a fraud for a long time. We'll put it on, but we forget to breathe. We'll go all day long and we'll say things like, oh my goodness, I didn't go to the bathroom all day long. And you're proud to tell somebody? I didn't eat lunch today, or I don't feel well. And you can't cough or sneeze around anybody right now. And that's not positive. You've got to take care of yourself so you're able to do the things that you do. And we want you to do it well. And now it's not only physically, it's emotionally, psychosocial. Think of all the ways that you do that. So just agreeing to take care of yourself, not only take care, but good care. Now, let's pay attention to the now. As I said a few minutes ago, I would be remiss if I acted as if there is nothing going on outside of what we're doing today. There is an international pandemic. People have lost their lives. People are ill. I mean, for me, working remotely is something that's very different. And I, for a full-time job, work at an academic healthcare institution. It is so much going on. There is just things going on. And I guess I was a little naive. One of the things I said when I talked to some local law officials in the beginning of this was, well, surely crime will go down. Okay, no. I don't know about you, but in Summerville, South Carolina, Charleston, the Low Country, there's been a spike. And I'm very interested in finding out what's going on in other places, mainly because sometimes there is the thought that you will get arrested or things aren't happening, and that's not the case. So I like to call that taking moments to ask what is breaking your heart currently, and how much of that can you change? How much of that can you control? How much of it do you need to take in? And how much of it do you just need to lay aside so you are not then putting that on someone else unjustly? So how does your department or agency define diversity and inclusion? And I do believe that's going to be one of the first questions that we have, poll questions, because what is important is this: how often, when you think of diversity and or inclusion, you have your own definition, but your colleague has their definition and other people have theirs. So I want you to answer, go to the poll that you see in front of you. And when you think, your first thought, when you think of diversity, and only one, I know there may be a few, but what's your first, that gut feeling when you see or hear the words regarding diversity? What do you think about? I'm gonna give you a moment to do that. Ronnie, you're gonna let me know?
Sure, and Megan, whenever we have at least 10 participants responding to the poll.
Because what I know is, if you had to put my glasses on and had to look through them, could you see? Probably not well. They're not made for you. So we have to decide as agencies and as departments that we define what this means so that we are not working and doing things that are counterproductive to who we say we are, that our walk is consistent with our talk, and sometimes it just isn't. And maybe we didn't have 10 to go. That's okay. And how about next? Thank you. Oh, race. Wonderful. Gender and no nationality, and looking at gender, geography, other as they come in second, but race clearly as number one. Thank you. So next, I want you to think about perception versus reality. How often when you are thinking about whether it's, and we will get into bias, but just thinking just human nature, your perception is your reality. But just because it's your reality, it doesn't make it the truth, nor does it make it my reality. When you are approaching people, just because you thought you said something in a way that was not offensive or that would just somebody would accept and they did not, then you begin to be a little deflated, defensive. So I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to look at this picture. And what you're going to do is let us know when you see the frog. So the next slide will show you a picture. How many of you see a frog? And I think they're able to go into the chat. You can say yes, or you can say no. And if you don't see a frog, what do you see? Oh, good, me, good, I see a frog. If you don't see a frog, what do you see? Oh, frog, good. Let's go to the next slide. Not 15 people. So some people see the frog. Someone says, I see a horse too. Thank you, Renee. Now let's go to the next. So there's a horse now. Kind of have to turn your head, right? So if I put them side by side, for those who saw the frog first, are you right? Or if you saw the horse, are you wrong? We saw the exact same picture. But just because our perspectives are different, it does not make one right or one wrong. Can it be that there are two things that were right inside this picture? Much like situations, just because I view it a little differently. I like that, Renee. Just because I view it differently, it doesn't mean I'm wrong and you're right. Can we have a conversation about how there is a bit of truth in both? And so we can work together as allies versus just advocating for one side or the other, and work together, or at least begin to see different perspectives. So and thank you for that. How often do we see the glass and we look at it? And some of us see it as half full versus half empty. Half empty in situations, especially for what some of us do, may look like very different things, or half full. Are you a person now? You can put that in the chat too. Do you see situations, or you look at this glass, is it half full or half empty today on this big Thursday? What is it for you? Half full, half empty. That is very honest. Thank you. What else? Who else? How do you see the glass? Half empty. Some people, full, Mackenzie. I had someone tell me before, it depends on what's in the glass. I don't have any control over what's in the glass at 11:20 in the morning. But viewing situations sometimes, and I know I've been there, that sometimes we look at things with optimism and someone only sees pessimism. We've got to begin to look at situations, and it has to be real and true for us. If things are going well, I find it half full. So my mood, and that's good to know. Because if I come in this morning and I have to go with the case or meet with a person I don't want to meet with, or talk to a person that's cheery and comes in and says good morning versus the one who says, oh, what's so good about the morning? Half full or half empty. So I want to go, when we talk about the next slide, intent versus impact. Now, I'm trying not to go get a little louder. I get excited about this, because I want you to think about how often we have been in situations where our intent did not meet the impact of what we said or did. We quickly find out, right? that how we communicated information may have negatively impacted the person or persons we are speaking to. And I had to ask, what clued us in? Where you may go in and say something, then all of a sudden body language changes, or someone says, oh no. If you've been watching anything on the national news, the naval officer who was relieved of his duties when the person came in to tell his troops to tell the other men and women, servicemen and women, and someone was taping it, there was some words that the media didn't bleep out for the first few segments. And I guess someone must have said something and then they went back and bleeped it out. So although it may not have been the intent, it is very hard to determine how people, especially people you don't know, may respond. But what are some things that clue us in? Could it be their actions? Could it be their demeanor? Could it be what they say? Could it be what they do? Could it be that I'm comfortable with them having emotions or someone else may not be? So when we look at that, one of the examples I want to give you, I want you to look at this next slide. I want you to look at how often, or has this ever happened to you? So you're just walking. This person stepped on this other person's foot. Now, the person who had their foot stepped on yelled, it hurts. And the person who did the stepping said, knock it off. Really? You harmed me. You brought pain to me. And when I responded in the way that I would usually, normally, or what is usual or normal for me, you took offense. So when we think of intent versus impact, sometimes it's best to just think about the differing perspectives, who we're speaking with, who's speaking with us, who do we bring with us, where do we go? Are there certain places that you go that you want to bring certain people? Are there certain things that elicit certain feelings for you? Do you know your triggers? If someone tap dance on something that just gets to you, do you already know it before they do it? Because if not, you will be triggered every single time, and our responses are different. And I could ask in this situation, who's right and who's wrong, but larger than that, what could be done differently? And sometimes asking that question even before is like, okay, we're gonna go into this situation. We can't control what someone else is going to say or do, but we can control what we say and do. So let's go over this. And people are like, I don't like to rehearse. Sometimes it is best. Now, you can't control what someone else is going to say or do, but you can control what you will say and do, and even your responses. Because what we know is this. I like to say this for the next slide. The elephant is in the room. Whatever room you're in right now, the elephant is in there with you. The elephant is always in the room. The elephant comes into your space because some of us are non-confrontational. The elephant is all in your personal space, but you don't say anything. You act like the elephant does not exist. You don't acknowledge the elephant. Some of you see it and may even touch it or look at someone else, but you don't say anything. Well, there's one or two things an elephant can do in any closed space that you could not ignore it. So I hope you're not mid-bite or anything, because I like to give you vivid imagery so you will remember. If the elephant were to poop in that room, you couldn't miss it. And I promise you, you can try to ignore it, but let's say we're going to be there for another hour. I don't think you want to be in the room that long with that. So why not address the obvious? Why not address what is really going on? Why not have the conversations about the triggers? Why not talk about ways we can do things a little differently? One of the main things I like to say is, I go around my campus, and because a lot of the people on campus are also my healthcare providers, what I like to do is when I go places, I might go someplace and say, good morning. And I'm an all day person actually, but morning person because I get up early. And I've gone places and someone will be like, I'm like, wait a minute now. And then it might be noon, good morning, good afternoon, and they grumping. So one day I just asked somebody, I'm like, someone said, oh, they're not a morning person. I'm like, okay, what time do you come to work? 7:30. What time do you get off? 3:30. You get paid for the morning? You do. Do you get paid for the afternoon? Yeah, I do. Do you get paid for okay, then you a morning, noon, and afternoon person. You got to do something different. I'm not going to buy that. It's just how that person behaves. And it has been accepted. So there is no accountability, because when we go into bias and unconscious bias, what you will see is it is about recognizing and holding people accountable, but also self-accountability. So what is bias? It is a tendency or an inclination. It happens. It does serve a purpose. It is impossible, according to Howard Ross, to eliminate, but some can be helpful. So one of the things I like to talk about is food. I like to cook, but I like to eat too. One of the things I love to cook is macaroni and cheese, and I make a mean one, but I'm lactose intolerant. What you don't want me to do on any day is to eat macaroni and cheese and be around you. I'm just saying it is not pleasant. I wouldn't do it to you, and I don't do it to myself. I swear he said that Sam too. So what happens is this: I know what I should and or should not eat because I know what it does to me. So there is nothing wrong with me having a bias over that. And if you want to serve me something and you ask about dietary things, that I tell you, because I know I would not be able to have sustenance if you only have things that are dairy. Depending on your height, where you sit, or how can you hear, or what are your limitations? What are your, what are the reasons? So some people want to sit in the front. Some people need to be in the front. So that matters. Point three, bullet three is one of the main important things that differentiate. Bias often, not always, but often leads to someone being treated unfairly. When you are treating people unfairly for whatever reason, then we have a problem. Now, some people thought in the past that it was rare, intentional, and conscious. Now, let me say this. We now understand that bias is normal, unconscious, and largely unintentional. Let me say this too, largely unconscious. There are some people that know exactly what they're doing. I'm sure each of us may have experienced that before. Sometimes unconscious, other times conscious. I like to say this. Being unconscious, if you had to think about your state of being, if someone is unconscious, what is their state of being? Unaware, asleep. So our job is to wake them up. They can't go through life, and they can't go through working with you, and they can't go through any of the things that we go through and always have their eyes wide shut. It is not okay. Now, it's not about guilt, but responsibility. And I would go along and say accountability too. Howard Ross and I spoke about that when he was at one of our summit last year, that responsibility, but also accountability. And it's something we all have. It's something we all have, which means I want to check DaNine before other people have to come in. I want to look at situations and say, what triggered me? What was it about this person or this situation that just upset me so much? What happened? How can I influence? What is my sphere of influence? Who do I talk to who can listen? So to make sure we have all perspectives. And what I like to say is, I have this pen, and I had it for years. I just paid attention to it. And it's a chair. It's like a bedazzled little chair, and it's a brooch actually. And I don't know what made me put it on a few months ago. I was going to a meeting that day, and it was going to be a pretty difficult meeting. And I put it on. And what came to mind for me in putting it on was this. In my mind, I said, how often do we go into situations and we look at situations and say to ourselves, wow, I wish I'd been at the table. Who was there? What did they say? They didn't hear everything. They didn't know all the information, because it happens so often that the people that should be around the table aren't around the table. So I said, you know what? I carried that to say, I just in case I'm not invited, I'm bringing my own chair. Every now and then, it's not an option that they don't get to hear the truth when they're making decisions. I believe more often than not that people are not as homophobic, they're not as xenophobic, they're not as misogynist, racist, sexist as sometimes we believe. It's just that no one checks them on it. They are largely unaware, because in the circles that they're in, they say and do things that people never check them on, and so it's accepted. Let me give you an example as we go to the next slide. Saying Chinese flu. What? If I said white flu or black flu, or think about it, would it be accepted? So when we think about things that don't get checked and how we check them, it makes a difference. So let's talk now about how bias affects our decisions and our actions. Thank you, Renee. I'm trying hard. So our perceptions, how we see people and perceive reality. How many times has someone said, oh, you know what, Renee? You're not as bad as I thought. And you're thinking, you don't even know me. So who was talking about me? So you already have a perceived notion of who I am and what I would say or what I will do when you don't even know me based on what someone else has said. I'm the person that wants to shake your hand and reintroduce myself every day. Why? Because I said sometimes I don't even know myself that well, so you can't possibly know me and what I would do and how I would do things. Although it may have been done in that situation, you may not be aware of all of the factors in that situation, our attitudes, how we react towards certain people. Now, let me be honest, full disclosure, there are some people because of things and interactions that you may act a certain way, but you got to be careful because someone's always looking. But is it because of something that they can't control? Is it because of something I saw on TV or something that happened a long time ago? I call that a ratatouille moment. If you've never seen the movie Ratatouille, you really should invest in looking at that movie. So a long time ago, something happened to you and you don't even realize that that record is playing so clearly for you today that you are judging and rating people on that same thing. And so because you saw something on the news that says if you go to Charleston, South Carolina, you may get robbed by an African-American male, and that's why they were getting shot in their back. So the first African-American male you see when you're walking down the street, you cross the street. Now, don't you think he notices that? I'm just saying. Our behaviors, how receptive or friendly we are towards certain people. Have you ever had somebody saying something all of a sudden like, hey girl, hey, and you're like, you know good and well. But why is it that we can go into certain communities or we can go into certain situations when something happens? Do we have expectations like, oh my goodness, I have people say that all the time. Oh, I didn't think you lived there. Where did you think I would live? What does that mean? Or when they see me, oh, you're not what I expected. I'm gonna leave that right there. What aspects of a person do we pay most attention to? Are we looking at the outside, the inside? Are we looking at clothes? Are we looking at shoes? Are we looking at degrees? I mean, is your degree more than mine? Is mine less than yours? Do you not have one? Am I rating you on that? Do I not even know you or your experience, but I'm already forming conclusions? How we listen to people actively. That have someone, you're sitting around a table and you say something and no one says anything. Someone else says it. It's like, oh yeah, Tom, great idea, great. Hold on, I just said that 10 minutes, really? And I found that I said Tom because I have a colleague who happens to be a COO now, who people were doing that to me in the meeting. And because we had this type of conversation, he decided he wanted to be an ally. And so when that would happen and he realized people looked over things I would say, he would come back and say, you know, whatever I just said. And they'd be like, oh, great idea. They was like, well, it seemed like you did not hear it when DaNine said it 10 minutes ago. Oh, okay. And he happens to be a white male. How about our micro affirmations? How much or how little we comfort people in certain situations? You go in and if a female cries, yells, screams, do you comfort her or is it easier when it's a male or you don't expect emotion or whatever the case may be? Is it that certain things happen and you're wondering, why is it such a surprise when a female is involved in certain things versus a male, when certain races are involved or when others are, what we expect to find when we go to the places and arrive where we go? Our micro decisions, transaction by transaction. What we've got to learn to do is each transaction, each person, each family, each colleague, each situation, we've got to look at it differently. We've got to begin to take it for what it is and not for what we think it may be. So when we go to the next slide, I want you to first see before we go into the video is to know the true reality of yourself. You must be aware not only of your conscious thoughts, but also of your unconscious prejudices, bias, and habits. What motivates you? What do you see? What are your experiences? What do you bring from the table to the table because of where you were born, how you were raised, where you live, your own personal experiences? So I want you to watch this video with me, and I want you to pay close attention because we're going to have an activity right afterwards.
Unconscious biases are those impressions that exist in our unconscious mind and unknowingly inform our opinions about people. When we make judgments about people, we all have biases. We are aware of many of them, but sometimes they are completely subconscious and reflect our cultural and social experiences. No matter how unbiased we think we are, these aspects of human nature shape how we interact with people and how we make decisions. They are blind spots in our rational decision-making, and we are unaware that they exist. As one famous psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, said, "The brain is a machine for jumping to conclusions." We make judgments within seconds of meeting someone about everything from their competence to friendliness and even honesty. If we do not counter these preconceptions, we can make mistakes that jeopardize our working relationships and hinder teamwork and creativity. We live and work in a diverse society, so we must be aware that our subconscious biases and stereotypes can affect how we think and feel about people we come into contact with.
So I want you to think, hopefully you have either, whether it's a sheet of paper, something you can write with, if there's someone in the room with you, you can turn to them, or if it's on your screen or even your cell phone on the notes page. I'm going to give you just a little bit of time to do the following. I want you to put your name, talk about or put your prior companies, whatever that means for you, job titles and the dates that you worked there, schools you've attended. You can go back to kindergarten if you like, your address, and your years of experience. I want you to take a little bit of time to do that, and then I will call us back in a little bit, okay? So begin. Welcome back, welcome back. Are you done? Did you get everything done? I hope you got done. I mean, Taskmaster, I need to make sure you're done. I gave you a lot of time. Are you done? Put it in the chat. Did you get done? Are you not done? Because what I want, not yet. No, I love, oh, you know why? According to the video that we just watched, Daniel Kahneman says that really it's 10 seconds. I gave you 15. We make decisions that impact people's lives in 10 seconds. Are they honest? Are they trustworthy? Should I walk into that situation? Did they deserve to die? What did they do? Should I hire them? I love this one. We have that at WSC a lot. They're not the right fit. What is the support hose? What do you mean not the right fit? Oh, they're not the last person. All the things. Renee, you're tripping. Yeah, you're funny. All the things that we always look at, and whether we articulate them or not, our unconscious bias creeps in and says all the reasons why we shouldn't. Whereas there is extant literature that says, instead of talking about all the things a candidate does not have when hiring, list the things they do have. When we're going to situations and driving into communities and about to deliver some news that may not be good, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I can see why, or what, no, oh yeah, they acted just like the apple doesn't fall for. No, we don't get to do that. We get to look at the glass half full. We get to utilize appreciative inquiry and think of some good things. Because let me say this, people are judging you also, and we need to invite them to not operate in unconscious bias when you're just there to do your job. That's it. And unlike some of us who get to work remotely or our home, you kind of can't do, most of you can't do what you do remotely always. So given that type of grace that we would want. So when we go to the next slide and look at our conscious and our unconscious mind, I want you to think about this when you think about slow thinking versus fast thinking. Your conscious mind is 5%. So I want you to think about your willpower, how you try to use willpower to control people's behaviors, not just your own, our habits, our beliefs, but we lose out on the subconscious mind and the greater influence. So think about it as, people like to think of it as, a milk jug. Think about how large that may seem depending on who's holding it. But compared to your unconscious mind, the Milky Way, which is 95%, you think fast. You go immediately, it's like this: beliefs, your creativity, your developmental stages, your imagination. We'll make something up about somebody in a minute and then be like, oh, that's not true when you meet them, because they never told you it was true. You came up with that, they didn't. Protective reactions. I'm holding my purse tighter to me, not because the person is a person of color or a man. It's because I got an uneasy feeling. Cool, bet, that's okay. But if you're doing it because they have to be Latino, Latina, or because they have to be a marginalized group, no, there's more to it. I need you to pay attention. And I want you to think about your habits and your addictions, what you like, what you don't, and your emotions and your feelings. That's the fast thinking, because we make how many decisions in a day? How many thoughts do you have? How important it is to pay attention to sometimes what we don't. So when we think about implicit or unconscious bias, I want you to think about the subconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. Social stereotypes, that's called like watching the news. I don't care what station you watch, okay? Whether we believe it's faux news, not news, right news, what's in front of you, whatever it is, from outside of your own conscious awareness. And it stems from our tendency to make associations. So we have so many things coming at us that we begin to associate. That's like a child who cannot read and they see the golden arches and they say, McDonald's, you're two. What you know about McDonald's? You can't read. Well, most 2-year-olds, not all. But how many times are we making associations to organize and help us organize and make sense of our world? But how many times have the associations not been correct about certain groups and certain people, but yet still we make them and we go along with those stereotypes and they're embedded in us, and systemically they begin to cause issues of bias and isms that exist. Dr. Banaji talks about that. And when you're looking at how unethical are you, and some people did not like when they came out with that in 2003 from the Harvard Business Review or the AAMC, when you talk about unconscious and implicit bias and the things that we do. So along with that, I do believe, yes, I want you to watch this clip. Okay, there's no volume. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna try it again. Thank you, Rodney.
Listen, I'm doing you guys a favor by letting you even be in here. Ukuba uphinde wakuchukumisa, ndakuncoma apha kwesi sihlalo.
Is she speaking?
Listen, I'm doing you guys a favor by letting you even be in here. Ukuba uphinde wakuchukumisa, ndakuncoma apha kwesi sihlalo.
Does she speak English?
When she wants to.
So I love movies. I love songs, music, analogies. So I want you to think about this. What happened in that moment? We're talking unconscious bias. We're talking the way our perceptions, our reality. That happens to be one of my favorite movies too, one of them, Black Panther. Isn't it funny that the males were talking, engaged, and the female was standing to the side? And automatically, when she started speaking, the first thing the male said, and there are layers there. If we could talk race, we could talk gender, we could talk everything, was, does she speak English? Ask her. And I love that she came back with, when she wants to. But what he didn't realize, because he didn't speak her language, is she was going to harm him. So how often do we make decisions? We speak around people, about people, and they're in a room, but we don't ever address them. I may say, oh, Anna, can you step out for a minute? Or how about this? You go to the restroom, and when you come back, we all clap and say, you got a promotion, yay. So we're gonna send you to rural South Carolina. Okay, you're not gonna get paid more money, and actually you're gonna do more, but you can build a team, and in about 2 years, you'll get the same amount you're making now. No, how often do we do that? And we don't even think about the situation, asking the persons and people that are involved and how things impact them. We talk all around them as if they don't hear us or don't understand. We don't get to do that. So identifying our blind spots. I want you to think of this. Albert Einstein says it best. We love qualitative and quantitative research. We love to have data, etc. But if I had to ask you this, your significant other or someone that's in your life that you really care about, how many times in a day do they take your breath away? If I had to ask you, with everything going on, if you knew that you were somehow exposed to COVID-19 and you needed to be quarantined, that you would not want to go home to your family and possibly expose them or the people you love, how do you rate or measure that? What scale is that on? Because not everything that counts can be counted. When you go and you're speaking to people and when tragedy occurs and they're in shock or they say or do things, and someone says, well, how did they take it? How do you think? So all of those things, I like that, Renee. I said sometimes I would love to go certain places when people's dominant language is not English and they were speaking another language and I knew it, so I could answer back. So they'd be like, oh shoot, yeah, I heard everything. Because the gap between intention and impact is a blind spot. And so what I want you to begin to remember is we all have them. So if I were to ask you to put your hands over your eye and remove them, and to do it maybe once or twice, sometimes you see those little spots and it's like, whoa, or you go out from a room or go from inside to outside and the sun is bright. And then all of a sudden there are things that you cannot see and you have to adjust. We've got to learn how to adjust, because although our intention may be one thing, the impact may be something different. We can't afford to continue to walk around with these blind spots and act like we don't know, because we're impacting lots of lives, including our own. So each of you was asked to go to the Harvard Implicit Association test. You were asked to go online, and this test is absolutely amazing. People like it or people don't. Millions have taken the test over a decade. And so I would ask you to say, yeah, you can put in the chat, which test did you take? Because you did have a choice. And then it's going to be some polls to ask questions, because I love it. I did take the test, gender and race. Thank you. And what test did you take? And let me ask the first question. How many of you blamed the test? So there's going to be a poll that's going to deploy in a few that's going to ask that question. So let me ask that now. When analyzing your results, did you find yourself blaming the test? So we have that poll. How many of you found yourself blaming the test? Because of course it could not be you. It had to be the test. That's all right, Renee. When you go back in and see it, I want you to make sure you take some. Do this all, let's do it often. I try to do it more regularly than not. Sometimes it doesn't work out for me. So answer the poll. If you took the test, how many of you found yourself blaming the IAT? You blamed the test, because clearly it couldn't be you what it's saying about gender and race, or clearly it couldn't be you. Or for some of us, it's like, yep, that's me. What did you find? Have you answered? I know when we do this on our campus and I do it in the community, the first thing people say was, well, I was holding my daughter or son, and so it made it hard to push buttons. Someone else will say, that's not who I am. Do you know unconscious means just that? Uncovering who you really are, or not who you are. Let me change that. I'm sorry. Uncovering some of the thoughts and things that are so buried so deeply that in the spur of the moment decisions and things you may do. It's not saying 100 or 1,000% that's what you would do, but it's at least allowing you to know. But what I like to say is when you're triggered and say that's not me and you want to just argue it, how often is that how other people see you, because that's how you really behave? How many times have you looked in the mirror and said, self, let me introduce myself or reintroduce myself to myself? So those are the things I want you to know. So if we had to say how many did that, and I want to find out, oh, 56% said yes and 44% said no. So instead of blaming the test, take it again. Don't try to master pushing the 2 buttons, because that's not what it's about. There's a lot of research about that, but yet still, it is at least for you to begin to look at things in a different way, because what it could mean is, how do you respond to certain races or genders? How do you respond in quick situations, sometimes when you don't even have that time to think long? Hopefully some of you learned things about yourself when you took the test. Would you say you learned some things about yourself by taking the test? I hope so. So when we go to the next slide, I want you to think about this. Thank you for that. I want you to think about this. What accelerates bias in our environment? And think about where you work, where you live. I call it where you play. If you had to answer questions, which you will, and answer anything that's in here talking about your levels of bias and what accelerates bias. How many of you have been, under stress, time constraints, attempt to multitask, or you sought closure in the last week? Under stress, so much going on. I love when people say there are not enough hours in the day. Actually, there are. It's just sometimes we have to prioritize what gets done. And just because we have that list that has like 50 million things on it, it doesn't mean that that's going to be what gets done. Because how many times have you had something occur so quickly that every part of your day has been totally changed, not what you planned? Or you're under time constraints, like, oh my gosh, I know I got to be on this conference call, or I know I got to do this WebEx, I got to be on Zoom, but then I got a meeting right after, I got to run and get this. What am I going to eat? When am I going to do this? When multitasking. So let me tell you a little story about, I always thought I was a great multitasker. I got 2 screens in my office right now. I'm looking at 2 laptops, I'm kind of improvising. And so I sent an email to someone, a colleague, and I needed an answer pretty quickly. And so I always have 5011, that's my number, things open at the bottom of my screens. I rarely turn my computer off, all of this stuff. So the person didn't answer me, and I went across campus about a day or so later, and I saw the person. Okay, my attitude was a little not nice, kind of funky. And I was probably immediately convicted about it, like, oh, that wasn't nice, because they kind of like, hey, and I was pretty cold. It's like, yeah, mm-hmm. And so I was like, I sent you an email, you didn't answer, and I need to answer. Like, you didn't send me an email. I'm thinking, lies, just lies. So I get back to my office, of course, and then I started doing something, and I looked, and all of a sudden, guess what? When I looked through emails, I wrote it, I typed it, but guess what I didn't do? I never pressed send. So rightfully, they were right and I was wrong. Now, yep, still in draft. Guess I'm not the only one. Now, I could have just forgot about it and just say, okay, whatever, but I needed the information. So, I picked up the phone like, hey, girl, hey. So that email I asked you about, you're right. I didn't send it. And, I couldn't let them blow to nothing now. Couldn't let them blow. But I was like, they were like, oh, see, I was like, oh, yeah. Can you send it to me? Okay, thanks. I said, you know what? No, but I'm sorry. And you know why we have to do that? If we do something wrong, y'all, we got to correct it. And if people are looking at us, do you know how powerful it is if someone in positions, no matter what positions, not only about authority, but especially in authority too, who could go back and say, I apologize, I was wrong. And then when seeking need for closure. Because no matter how good we are, when these things happen, we're thinking so quickly and responding and acting so quickly, we often miss things. And we're human. So when you think about the role of leadership around diversity and inclusion, thank you, 90%, great. The 10%, I need some tips from you. Because coming home and working remotely and doing things different than I've ever had to do them, it's not that I couldn't, it's just that I wouldn't or didn't want to, has been a learning curve for me. I mean, it is amazing, sometimes good and sometimes not, but it's all right. So when we look at the next slide and the role of leadership, I want you to think about this. And I love when we'll say, well, I'm not a leader, I beg to differ. To someone in some capacity, in some ways, or every way, whether you have people report to you or not, you are a leader. So you get to set the tone. When you walk in the room, do you bring the sunshine or are you the thunderstorm? And sometimes we need a bit of both. But can we have a rainbow too? Do you develop, how you develop awareness? So when you go back and you have that conversation with that person who loves to always, well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. How about not? How about we put all the cards on the table and have a conversation? I don't need you to always be the person that finds something wrong with every situation. Please. And how you marshal resources in the right direction. For some reason, when we say that, too many people think that means money. Do you realize you are a natural resource? All of the information that you bring to the table, every experience you've ever had that has made you into the human being that you are, doing the phenomenal work that you do, that people may some complain about, but they don't want to do what you do. That's a resource. So when you put that in the right direction and you also channel that and have other people going in the directions that you know would be most conducive for victims and families, that would be most conducive for what you need to have happen, so you can feel supported. At this point, are you protected? Do you have gear when you go into people's homes? Are you having, do you have everything that you need? Is this the first time we're thinking about it? If so, then, you have a lot of work to do for yourself too. So when we go to the next slide, I love that Jose, sunshine and rainbows, me too. I like glitter. So when you think about it, accountability, the connection. I call this hashtag until it happens to you, right? It's kind of pertinent. People are like, well, I don't know if that's, no, it's not meant to be funny. Because when it's someplace else, when this was going on in another country, it was all right. But when it hit the US, y'all, we are global. Then it's, high alert. October, November, December, shh, the elephant's in the room. February, March, sound the alarm. We don't get to do that. We have a responsibility and accountability, and the connection is we all are in this together. No, you can't take a proposed vaccine to Africa and think this is going to be a Tuskegee experiment. You can't do it. Do you want somebody to experiment on you? Well, we need clinical trials. That is true. And how long do most of them take? And how long do we go through things? And how do we choose that? Even the thought, because my thought is always, when someone tells me that it will be painless, it's not going to harm you first. We just had to lay off 900 employees on our health side. And folks said, well, it's for the good of the order, but you're still employed. Be quiet. You don't get to say that. We're going to have 20 and 15% decrease in pay, and they say time. I don't know about you. Even if pay had to be decreased, I don't know what I could not do because I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do. Which do we take off our plate? So when we think about that, how do we communicate that to others? Because I want you to think about the next slide when we think about the six conscious steps. Tell the truth. Notice what influences your decisions. I'm influenced by emotion. I'm influenced when things happen. I'm influenced because I act different when the supervisor walks in the room. I'm influenced because I know it's a grant. I'm influenced because it affects my paycheck. I'm influenced because I want to work with you. I'm influenced because I don't want to work with you. I controlled it. Gather data about yourself. You may lie to others, but don't lie to yourself. Who are you? What motivates you? Why are you still there? Are you being productive? Are you not? What are you doing to contribute to the good of the whole for everyone? Stretch your comfort zone. The people you normally work with, do something different. You normally sit by, do something different. How you would usually do something, change it up. I love when people will say, think about all the times that we hear about a parent that unfortunately is supposed to take a child to daycare, but that's not their normal routine, and they leave them in the car. That's so tragic. But, and then people want to condemn them and say how awful they are, etc. My question is, how many times have you driven home or driven to work and you get there and can't even remember the route? You're like, I can't believe I'm here already. You don't remember the drive. You got so much on your mind, etc. Okay. The same way when things change. So if you don't stretch your comfort zone and say, I need to pay attention, I need to put my purse in the back, then I'll remember that little person that's never quiet, but that was quiet for that time. I need to stretch my comfort zone. I need to go someplace. I need to read a book. I need to read and find out more. I need more literature because the information I'm operating on, I change every day. So if you are operating on what someone told you a week ago, then you definitely are outdated. So the same difference with this type of work. When you don't think you need professional development, there's always something new we each can learn. I plan to learn until I die. And I told somebody, I ain't even got time to do that because I'm busy. So we've got things we've got to do. Stimulate your curiosity about others. What are the groups that you're interested in? What are the groups that don't interest you as much? Learn something about both of them. Let's have some conversations. Let's go, with a granted, with opportunities to work with so many people, you have the gem of an opportunity to get to know other people and things that they're doing, what works and what doesn't, or how that wouldn't work. Now, it's not one size fits all, because I know what works in Charleston may not work in Atlanta, may not work in Chicago, may not work the same way in DC. I work at an academic healthcare institution. It may be very different than what your agency is. How we define diversity and inclusion versus how you know best. You're the expert. Because when you expand your constellation on input, it is about what you are able to bring as well as put out. And the last one I love, if you mess it up, clean it up. If you mess it up, clean it up. Stop acting like it's always everyone's fault and everybody else must take responsibility except for you. It's never your fault. Just like with that email and me, I would not have been the person I say that I am if I had glossed over it, if I did not call back. But even in that, one of the last things that I had to do was say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I accused them of doing something or not doing something that they had no control over, and it was me. If I had let that opportunity go and not apologize, not say, I'm sorry, let it be explicit, that I'm operating in the same type of bias. And at that point, it's not unconscious. I knew it. It wasn't okay. So we've got to go back and correct things. Think about what you do with your children or little people all the time, that we tell them things. I have a friend that has twins, and her husband works at the Pentagon, and she is former military also, and they live in Virginia, and the twins are 6. And she said, they've talked to the kids about what's going on, but they don't know how much they're ready for. So she has not been able to sleep, having insomnia like many of us. So she was up watching a movie and was eating ice cream the other night. So he comes downstairs and she puts ice cream under the covers and says, where's the party? What's going on? And she was like, go back to bed, boy. You shouldn't be up. What's going on? I said, now that's not right. He's up for a reason. Either he heard the TV or maybe he couldn't sleep. It would have been a wonderful opportunity to grab another spoon. Yes, I know it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but if you were up and he was up, y'all were up to have a conversation, let him have a few spoonsful. Hey, he home all day anyway. So there are things we can do and ways we can correct things when we go into situations. I love when folks say, well, it's not explicit about victims. At this point, it actually is. What you see, some of us don't ever want to have to see, witness, be a part of. So one of the last slides that I have is when it's personal. So this is my nephew. This is D'Angelo Damone Reed. My nephew, I tell everybody he was imperfectly perfect. That's just it for me. He didn't do everything wrong, but he didn't do everything right. But what I know is on January 22nd of 2016, nothing would ever prepare me for getting the call from his older brother that he had been murdered. Nothing could prepare me. No matter how many degrees, no matter what. And then he was killed in another city, one that I didn't even know he had gone to with so-called friends. And so what happens in situations, I know that I had no idea all the things I was doing in the community, starting organizations and having forums and doing this work. What I didn't know is a process. No one told me that because his mother was my sister and was deceased, information I could and could not receive. No one told, it was all the things I never knew. I didn't know anything about a victim's advocate. What is that? I didn't know there was a fund of money. I didn't know any of this stuff. And so what was amazing is, as I wrote letters, as I began to email, because at that point I had a mother and a father that wanted answers. I had a grandmother who was 91 years old who wanted answers that I didn't have. And I had to begin to go through this process of figuring it out. And the only way I was able to really make some light of it is because I had a close friend whose son had been murdered not even 6 months before that, who she and I and another person had started this grassroots organizations because of young people in our community who had gone to the beach, who had gone to Myrtle Beach and were murdered. 3 of them still unsolved. What I can say is throughout the process, some of the people I worked with, whether it was the solicitor's office, it was the sheriff's department, and what was ironic with this case, with my nephew's case, was this. Because there have been so many murders in Florence, South Carolina, off of the Interstate 95, that corridor of shame, the detectives that normally would work the case were busy with other people and other cases. So we got officers who normally would not work the case. Thank goodness, because a case that they said would probably not be solved. He was murdered and his body laid outside for 4 days. And then it was called in, although people heard and knew from the beginning, but it was not anytime whatsoever. It was after we met with, because I'm just that person. We rolled the Florence side. After we met, what was amazing to me is it was not even 2 weeks before they had not 1, not 2, but all 3. And it was absolutely amazing to me also that 1 year to the day of his murder, we were in court. 2 turned on 1. My nephew was 22. The person that was accused of killing him, the 3 boys were, at that point, 17, 18, and 19 years old. Lives gone, right? 1 is in jail now, and what happens is his family still says he's innocent. He didn't do it. He says he didn't do it, that they were friends. The solicitor, everything else, it was amazing to me. He had an attorney. The representation wasn't there. I could talk about disparities, et cetera, but let me tell you about where bias comes in and things I didn't understand. I knew nothing about an impact statement, but I knew I needed to say something because my parents at this point, no one wanted to go to be in trial and be able to hear it. So of course I did a lot of that. One of the things that stood out to me so much was I could not afford to have my husband come with me because it was always the thought, if they tried to retaliate, and trust me, some of his family did in some ways, if they tried to retaliate, I could not have both me and my husband lose our lives and our daughter not have parents. That shouldn't be anybody's thought, conscious or unconscious, because of what someone else does. And so we went to trial, and 4 days to the date. So the day he was murdered, we were in trial, and the verdict was read the day that they found his body, almost 2 years later, actually, at that point. And what was amazing to me is I had officers and people follow me out in tears with the impact statement after the verdict was read. He got 35 years. They have never been touched in that way. And I'm thinking it was a surreal experience. But it was because of having that, I had to go into the solicitor's office. I had to talk to them sometimes. Sometimes they didn't want to be bothered. I had one tell me, I got on their nerves, and and then she stopped short of saying Black people. And you can only imagine some of the things that we went through with officers. But these same officers that I'm friends with now, these same officers that I keep in touch with, these same people who were victims advocates, et cetera, that when that murder happened and you saw on national news when the officers were killed in Florence, those were my friends. Those were people who worked my nephew's case. So I was one of the only people, aside from law enforcement, that when they brought those bodies to MUSC for autopsies, that they called and said, come back here with us, your family. So when I tell you it matters, when I tell you to think about the biases, to have the tough conversations, that I was having conversations with sheriff departments and people I didn't know existed. I didn't know that there was an attorney that worked for the sheriff office. There were more people in that room when I had the initial meeting after writing everybody I wrote. than it was family members. But what is amazing is it became personal. But it shouldn't have to be personal for us to make a difference and a change. It shouldn't have to be personal for us to go and say, uncover unconscious bias and say, look, this is what has occurred and this is what we need to do, because we don't want it to be one of our children. I'm so sad it's anybody's. So these are some of the things. And when I say I take this personally, why I do, because in summary, unconscious bias is well documented. We know it exists. We know how people look. I look at the pictures of my nephew and people like, he was so handsome. He doesn't look like what? He doesn't look like he deserved to die. No one does like that. Nobody. I don't care who you are. You don't get to be judge and jury. It influences our behavior. So how we respond, what we say, even when that's not what I meant, pay attention to what you say. Pay attention to how you say it. Pay attention to, even in your meetings, what is being said. What photos are displayed when you're talking about certain groups? What are the graphics that are used? Are we being, are we equal opportunity people, that we're putting things of all ethnicities, genders, regions, etc.? How unconscious bias replicates the social hierarchy. It's wild out there, especially now. People who are lying saying, well, African Americans are dying at a higher rate for coronavirus because they are predisposed, because, well, I got family members, a few that have died that didn't have any of the, risk factors. They said it was older people at first. Now it's everybody from an infant. No, come on, man. There is science behind this. There is research and there's a reason, but I don't want to be the one in the number for you to, it to have to be that you're doing the documentation because I'm not here. It impacts healthcare decisions and results. That's where you come in. Victims, etc. It's a shame sometimes at the time we meet people, it's at the most vulnerable times in their lives. But that's what happens. So you make the difference. You make the difference. In individuals and in organizations, it can be effectively reduced when we do this and we carry this information and we address it, even when it's tough. Now, let me say this. You have to decide you want to take it on. Don't take it on if you're not ready, because you can't fall on every sword, because one will be fatal. But there are sometimes some things that that you just have to take them on. And more diversity results in better decision-making. When we have people around the table, and it's not just race, it's all the things that were on that list and then some. When we think about race and gender and ethnicity and geographical locations and who, multi or bilingual, and all of the different ways to look at diversity and inclusion, LGBTQ, as well as heterosexual Christians versus not, all of that. Then we're able to sit around a table. And then we still have to ask ourselves, who's missing? Because sometimes the sad part is we want to talk about who's there when we should be saying we're missing some valuable perspectives. Do we have the voice of young people? We like to make decisions for people around them, but we don't talk to them, right? Do we have some of the families here who will be honest and say, oh, I know my nephew was something else, but that's not what he deserved. And I don't want anybody else to do it. So what can I do to help? And so when we look at that, in closing for me, and then we'll open it up for questions or questions you have, is I'm here to support you. I'm here. If there are things you can, my email is available. There are questions, there are things that come up later. Let me be a resource. That it's just that simple. I may not know the answer, but I can help you get the answer. We can work it out together. Sometimes it's just having a sounding board. Oh, my pleasure. And then thinking about what a path forward is. Of everything that we talked about today, is there anything that you can take as a nugget to place in your pocket besides your feelings, and how you can do things a little differently? You're doing everything 1,000% right? Wonderful then. But if not, how can we work together and share information? Because I love this. Is your trusting cup half full or is it half empty? Do you trust the majority of employees to do the right thing, or do you manage to the minority? Decide to believe. I just believe that if it were not for people like you doing what you do and how you do it, I can't imagine what things would look like. I knew, but now I know from 2016 until now, I know in just a little bit of a different way. And because of what you do, it makes all the difference for everyone else. And I'm one to always make sure I say that, but I hope you are also saying that, because that's what matters. that you deserve to be treated well. So in doing this, it's no way you can go do what you do and then people mistreat you, nor you do that for others, because I know sometimes it's rough. Thank you for your time. And I will now have any questions. I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. If anyone has any questions, you could type it in the chat box or in the Q&A, and let me know if you have any at this moment. I think you have one more slide with resources.
I do. So there are some resources that are there for some of the information as well as videos, etc. I love that. I had someone tell me before, after my dissertation, oh, you know, it should only be 3 or 4 years old, but the goodies are some of the staples of why and how people are formulating what they're doing today. And I want you to know the historical perspective of why things are done. There are all kinds of informations and tools that you can use. This is just the beginning. When you go to Howard Ross, I mean, there's so much out there. But if you need to make sense of it, if you need to make it, you know, applicable, because it's not always one size fits all, let me know. We can have conversations about it. What you got? How about in your areas, in your places? I mean, are you finding that you know, it's always good, people are always receptive, that, you know, even having you all come on today, there's a lot that's going on in the world that, you know, hey, people get called away, etc. My dissertation is, and actually what is hilarious, Christina, my dissertation is African-American students' perceptions of retention programs and services at predominantly white institutions from 2007. I went to Youngstown State. So if you Google my name and Youngstown State, it will come up. It was always about diversity. I won't say what I wanted it to be at first about the cultural minstrel show, but one of my faculty members let me know that I'd never get done. I agree, Renee, we should humble ourselves. Not a question, but oh, thank you. Is it Lene? Thank you so much. It's always that thought of, can they feel that when they can't see you or you're not present? Because I'm a person, I like to be all my fabulosity to be in person with you. But I'm recognizing that's not always the case. And that was my own bias. Probably before all of this occurred, I'd be like, I was always, ask Ronnie, like, I don't want to do online or webinars. I want to be in person. Look at my bias. It's like my bias is showing. But now, thank you. And you are also, the work that you do. Thank you so much. What else y'all have? Y'all, hey, you're mighty quiet group today, mighty quiet. Are you, and is everybody still like working? Do you have all the safety gear and things that you have to, are supposed to have when you go and have to be around people with masks and with, I know sanitizer? I'm washing my hands so much that I don't feel like I have any skin. My accent, some victims say I need someone who, oh, wow. Real English? Okay, now, see, that triggers me. So Maria, let me take a moment. It is amazing to me that you can be going to them to assist them at a very traumatic time, and that they don't even understand that you are the help, and yet they are shutting that or turning that away. And so what I find in situations like that, I know it can't happen all the time. And what I tell, especially some of the students and residents and other people is this: it is amazing when you have someone with you who can say something like, so Maria is one of the best at what she does. In fact, I'm here to learn from her. If you would rather work with me or someone else, that's fine. Maybe second best, but that's okay. But she is the truth. Because when somebody else says that, and then they look and say like, well, I didn't mean it like that. No. Just wanted to bring it to your attention. But we'll do what you need, because every now and then they have to hear themselves and what they've said and done that's harmful. And I'm sorry it has happened. And I say I'm sorry because everybody deserves to be treated well. Because we have an accent or because of how we, look or how we dress, we shouldn't be mistreated. at all. It is not acceptable. Now, I know sometimes, especially now that people are like, well, it's almost like this is not Burger King, but the customer is always right. No, we don't get to mistreat people. And I will interrupt things usually quite often, unless I look and someone says, no, DaNine, don't. It's almost like, no, stand down, because I'm on it. I'm on it because I just can't do it. I'm about to be on it with some senior things that have happened that some people are not going to be happy about with the way the announcement went out to some people for the 900 people that were laid off. It's not okay. And to tell people, well, you're eligible for unemployment with the other 200,000 that have now been in the system, that the system keeps breaking. So these people weren't even given 24-hour notice. That's a bias because you're still eating and your check is still there. No, we don't get to do that to people. What else? Thank you. Thank you. And I want to, Josue didn't say this, but we met at a conference, well, doing this type of work. And when I met him, his questions and I was like, oh my gosh, he's just the coolest. And he was like, there's going to be an opportunity. And I was, you hear that a lot, but it's not always that it happens. I'm so glad it could happen. And he convinced me with Zoom too, because, there was not a pandemic when we started talking about this. So when they were like, choose a date, I'm thinking, like August. They're like, no, like March, April. And so when you have people that are persistent and really working to make sure the people that are before you are people that can assist in us doing this together. See, because we're in this together. It's not me, it's not you, it's us. It's a village approach, and that's just the way I believe it is. So thank you for just pursuing it and making sure it could occur in the work that each of you do. So thank you so much, Ronnie. Thank you for all the technical support and everything behind the scenes, along with Megan, to make sure that that's one thing I didn't have to worry about, because when the video didn't work out, y'all don't understand, my anxiety started kicking in. I was about to lose it, but see how calm everybody was and everything went well. So thank you so much. And my email, you have access to it. I know it's a part of the information, but it can be shared, because if you need me, please, and I'm very serious. And I want you to, when you email, tell me who you are and tell me, if we were on the, the Zoom webinar together, cool. So I'll make sure frame of reference. It is perfectly fine for you to do that, because I am not a resource just for the moment. We know each other now. So I'm a resource for the long haul.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Fleming, and thank you, Ronnie and Megan, for the technical support. This was a great webinar. We will be sending out the recorded link along with the survey and Dr. Fleming's contact information as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or her. And again, I want to lastly thank you again, Dr. Fleming, for this amazing webinar. And I'm hoping everyone can take this resource to their organization and apply these techniques, these skills to the work that they all do. Again, Dr. Fleming, thank you. And a virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you for joining. Please stay safe and feel free to reach out to me if you need any assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.